All right, call our meeting back to order. This is Tillamook County Budget Committee. Today is Tuesday, April 11, 2023, and we're about halfway through the first day. So our published agenda goes from 1:30 until about 4, at which time we will adjourn until tomorrow afternoon, and then most of the day on Thursday. So a number of our presenters have been online, and I think that'll probably continue. But so far, so good. We're on schedule. And we'll begin now with the surveyor. And I don't know, I guess
Good
he's
afternoon,
online.
Budget Committee. Can you hear me okay?
You're loud and clear. Just say your name and we'll be good to go.
Okay, sounds good. I'm Michael Rice, Tillamook County Surveyor for the record. I was going to start off with some fun facts for you. Over the last 105 years, I'm just your 6th Tillamook County Surveyor.
Wow.
I've been employed with Tillamook County for nearly 15 years and your county surveyor for over 7, which already puts me in the top 10 for longevity since Tillamook County was established in 1853. If you're interested, we actually put together a link on our website called County Surveyor History. You should check it out. It's pretty interesting. I've been surveying for nearly 20 years, 10 of which is a licensed surveyor for the state of Oregon. Also in that same 10 years, I've run a small surveying outfit in this community, and hopefully have another 20 years in me. And the reason I mention these numbers is not just to show the longevity and stability of a typical surveying career and this position at Tillamook County, but to also make you aware there's a sharp contrast right now with the current trend in my profession across the state of Oregon and I believe across the nation. In 2022, a task force was put together to address the shortage of licensed surveyors in Oregon. And included in that task force were organizations like OSBILS, NCEES, DLSO, several municipalities, City of Portland, ODOT, several community colleges, OIT, Portland State, Oregon State, and several private companies too. And I do have some of the results of that study, and I wanted to share those with you. I believe I've already shared some of them with you. But here are some of the raw numbers that in the last 20 years, the number of licensed surveyors has dropped 63%. Of those remaining, 69% are over the age of 51, and 43% are over the age of 61. So to put that in perspective, in the year 2000, there were 2,100 registered surveyors in the state of Oregon. But by 2020, that number had dropped to just 665 in the state. And with the current trends in those ages I just gave you, in the next 10 years, that number could drop to just a few hundred, serving the whole state of Oregon. We're literally a dying breed. That could become a real potential problem. But they did come up with some recommendations and began implementing some of them. Their first recommendation was obviously compensation. With similar education and years of experience requirements for licensure or even sit for your exam as other professionals who make substantially more, they began implementing wage increases and not just for the registered surveyors but also entry-level positions to incentivize people to join the profession. Another one that was a little more unpopular recommendation was relaxing the standards of years of experience for licensure. Right now, the experience-only candidates needed 12 years experience, and they're dropping that to 9. Bachelors in surveying used to require 4, now needs 3. And associates in surveying was at 8, dropped to 6 years experience. And also, engineers with bachelor's degrees can go from 8 years to 6 years of experience. I believe this is relaxing the standards is not the way to go about improving the workforce. You're going to create less experienced, less competent surveyors in the future. The next recommendation they had was aligning curriculums between community colleges and the universities to make for a more seamless transition from an associate's degree to a bachelor's degree. That's a great idea, and they began working on that as well. And also expand outreach to students and schools about surveying. I've even given a couple surveying presentations here at East Elementary School for my daughter's class and others. Turn on the equipment, at talks, they think that's the coolest thing ever. Show them some pictures, kind of explain what we do, and just introduce them basically to the profession, to some of the terminology. Let's be honest, not many kids grow up wanting to be a surveyor or really even know what one is. But I'm also trying to grow surveyors in-house. I've hired staff that didn't have any prior surveying experience, and I'm training them with years of education on staff. The surveyors department is myself, county surveyor. I have a survey supervisor and a survey technician. Also an office specialist too that we share with community development. It's a third split with planning and building. And as you know, half our workday is in the office. We review file maps, make sure they're in compliance with ORS chapters 209 and 92. And I hear that recordings are down in other departments. We haven't seen the same thing. We've been busy. I put together a list of all the filings we've done, and that's from April 1st, 2022 through April 1st, 2023, as I've done in the past, just for comparison. This last year, we filed 117 boundary surveys and boundary line adjustments, another 21 in the queue. Last year, we had 116, about the same. We filed 30 partition plats, have another 9 in the queue, and last year was 20. This was actually the most productive year of partition plats in 15 years since 2008. We filed 4 subdivisions, have another one in the queue. We filed 4 last year as well. We even filed a condominium plat, have another one in the queue, and we haven't filed a condominium plat since 2011. In addition to our filings being up, our field crew has been busy as well. And like I said, we're fully staffed, and half of our days are not in the office, we're out in the field. We've recently completed several projects, but just to list a few, Public Works, we helped out with topography surveys on Blaine Culvert. We set some control for that as well. Fairview Culvert, the road's still out down here east of town. We did the topography for that. Illingsworth Creek topo, and we wrote an easement across the waters of the state. Trask Culvert, we helped out with a right-of-way project up at Delmar Lane in North County. And then we completed Amity Avenue vacation down in Escalon. It's got monuments in the ground now and a map filed to go along with the public vacation. Community development, we recently just did a topography survey on Tillamook River Loop Road. They were doing a flood study out there. We've done several projects for the commissioners, most recently another topography survey for the Tillamook Tidewater boat launch. And that's in conjunction with what we're already mandated to do by the state. As I've told you before, and you're aware, we help maintain the grid of government corners. The reason we have the PLCP fund is to help maintain that grid. This last year, we restored 16 government corners and visited or reconnaissanced countless others. If they need work, we'll stop and spend a day or two freshening them up, adding accessories, a new monument if needed. If it looks good, like it'll last another 10, 20 years, we'll put a check mark next to it and move on to the next. And we also add GPS coordinates to these when available. That's really the best way to preserve these monuments. So even if a cat takes them out or a logging operation, we can replace those monuments to the 100th of a foot. As far as the budget goes, we're a small department. There's not a lot of meat on the bones, but we do collect about $50,000 a year around for map filing fees, recordings, and that's about the same cost of the materials and services. It's roughly the same amount. So basically, asking for wages and benefits for myself and my employees, but with the PLCT fund covering 15% of those wages, I'm actually only asking for about 85% of the wages of 3 1/3 employees from the general fund. We can provide all the services that we're mandated to do and that I've detailed for approximately $360,000 a year from the general fund, but Sean can check that number for me. And I believe that's about all I had. If there's any questions, concerns, comments?
Question from Mr. Rice. I have one, just out of curiosity, the fewer surveyors that are now professionally licensed and rolling, what percent of those remaining would be in public employment versus independent business people?
That's a great question. So there's 36 county surveyors. Some counties only have a couple employees like I do. Some have huge departments and different sides of their department. One might just check maps, one might just do condos, one might just do corners. We do all of those jobs, just the 3 of us basically. So I'd say, a rough guess, if we have 660 something licensed surveyors, I'll bet you only 40 of them are public.
Interesting. Other questions?
Something we needed to know.
I was just gonna tell you, the salary that's in here is already been split, 85-15, so this is the 85% of the general fund that is applicable to the surveyor's office.
And no change in FTE.
No,
So what percent of your work is required or mandated under some statute, or aside from just somebody wanting to subdivide, let's say, a plat and make it into 2 homes or something like that? What do you absolutely have to do under statute?
Are you talking as a private surveyor or a public
No,
surveyor?
as in your job, there's certain things that you must be mandated to do. And if somebody
Yes,
came up there and
correct.
said, we need to locate a corner or something, and you're the only resource, then I'm assuming that falls to you.
Yes, so the private surveyor would do the actual partitioning, and then they would submit that plat to our department after they've got planning approval. We check the closures, we check for compliance with things like the narrative, the legend, the scale. We make sure that the vesting is correct. The owners are the ones that are listed. We maintain conformance in all those plats, redline them, send them back to the surveyor. They send them back with the corrections, and then we facilitate all the different departments approving, signing, and then filing it with the clerk's office. On subdivision plats and condos, it's a little different. We actually do field visits. So in addition to all those checks of the map from the private surveyor, we go out and physically check the monuments to make sure they hit within tolerance. And on condos, we do measurements for the buildings, make sure they match the map as well. So the subdivision and condominium plats are a lot more labor intensive than the partition plats.
One last question, just out of curiosity, how much is a level transit these days? If you went out to buy one.
That's a great thing. That's a great question. I got a used one in my private capacity a couple years ago for about $350, which was unheard of. But now I think if you could find one for $1,000, you'd probably be in a pretty good boat.
Interesting. Well, okay, other questions for our county surveyor?
So Mike, just out of curiosity, I heard you say there are 36 county surveyors, so there's one for every county, is that right?
That's correct.
And do all of the counties have their own surveying departments, or do some of them contract out the work, or how do the other smaller counties do it?
Well, I recently had a discussion about this. I have a list of all the county surveyors, and the list shows elected versus appointed and lists all the county surveyors by name. But it was recently brought to my attention that there were 3 counties in the state of Oregon that contract out those services. I wasn't aware of that, but I have reached out to those county surveyors to see how that works, if that's just something they do through their private company, if that's, I haven't gotten back with those surveyors yet, or they haven't gotten back yet.
Okay, thanks, I was just curious.
They did that, I was made aware of a list though. It was Baker, Curry, and Brooke County were the 3 contracted surveyors in the state of Oregon. I haven't done any comparables, and like I said, I haven't received word back from them, but I'm interested too to see how that works.
Thank you. And I don't think I've seen the study that you were talking about, that at the beginning of your talk, you talked about the study, multi-organization study to look at surveyors and the path of surveyors as a career. Can you send us a link?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. You want me to just send that to all 3 of you?
Sure, thank you.
Okay.
All right, anything else?
Nope, very straightforward, thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Anything from the treasurer or Rachel on this one? Nothing.
No.
All right, thank you so much. We'll keep moving.
Thank you.
All right, now we'll do IS, Information Services, Communications. But there are 2 separate ones there. We're going to do them separately, right?
We're going to sit together.
Good morning. For the record, Jeff Underwood, Interim Information Services Director. For the information services side, the big phrase that you're going to get to hear year in, year out, technical debt. Basically, most of the money that we're spending is to keep the software and hardware running, maintain the licenses so we can still get our email, we can keep things going. We do have some issues where we're just trying to get things modern and keep them get things back to keep up with what's currently going on and things we're seeing in the future. But the vast majority of it is really just paying off that technical debt and keeping the wheels on the bus. One of the big things that I'm doing right now, we've used Sophos as our primary security system. It's all coming, it is coming end of life at the end of this year. All the hardware needs to be renewed, all the software. But what I've done is I'm actually looking at replacing it with a variety of vendors. And our antivirus on the desktop being one, our firewall another. What that does is it allows us to, rather than relying on Sophos to catch everything, this gives us multiple vendors, so there's a better chance. If the firewall misses something, the antivirus on the desktop might catch it. So it's kind of hedging our bets against putting all our eggs in one basket. I was prepared to ask for a bit more money than Sophos costs to request that. After I did all my research, over the 5-year expected lifespan of these solutions, it's going to come in about $20,000 less. So that makes me very happy. That was probably the big thing as far as just servicing technical debt. We'd like to upgrade the wireless system. This was put in 10 years ago at least in the courthouse at a time when it was, hey, this is kind of a nice to have, let's see what happens. Post-COVID, we definitely need something a lot stronger, that's going to handle. Nowadays we're expecting people to be sitting in this room with laptops and doing their work in a more mobile environment. So we are looking for a little bit of money to improve our wireless infrastructure. The camera system, we need a couple upgrades. We need to upgrade the licensing itself. We have a couple more workstations that we want to add for the main entry and the new courtroom upstairs. And basically we have to go from a pro to an enterprise license to make that happen. So we're asking for a little bit of money for that. The security cameras themselves, they're a little bit old, getting long in the tooth, and the resolution and the quality on them is not really where we need it to be functional. That's probably one of the biggest costs that we're looking at, but just in order to provide adequate video to anybody that needs to see what happened, we're starting to get to the point where it's not the clarity of it might not be what we need in today's needs. So those are really the other big one is the wiring has not been upgraded other than in rooms like this where we've done a complete revamp of the entire area. The wiring has not been updated in the courthouse in the 20 years that I've been here. So I'm looking at doing half of one floor each year for the next 6 years maybe. And starting off at the DA's office just because they're already trying to do their own renovation. It's a lot cheaper if we can get in there while they've already got the walls torn out. They're one of the worst as far as the locations of the existing network compared to where they really need it. And then the overall project, at best, we usually have about Cat 5 wiring, which is 2 generations old. So looking at something a little more modern, the more we move to cloud and do the amount of data we're throwing around the network, we just need some wiring that can handle the higher throughput that we're looking to get. So those are kind of the things that IS is working on at this point.
Question. So as far as inter-county transfers from the department, the IS department works with every department in the county, and they do all of the IS work. Are we not collecting enough money from the departments themselves to fund the department properly?
So I didn't bring that big book with me.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely bring it up tomorrow. If you look at, we are recouping costs, but it's what I can capture if A, it's been coded correctly, and B, it's in the accounting software system.
Okay.
And then I pull a whole bunch of information from the Statement of Revenue and Expenditures, information from the IS department, from BOC, my office. It goes into Maximus, which is my indirect cost allocation software. And then it spits out a report that's about this thick and gives me those numbers.
Okay.
I can only input the information that I get and have to rely on Isabel, Jeff, everybody in the general fund, central service departments to provide me with those numbers.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
I can let you know how much we recoup for IS.
So Jeff, I know that you have in your budget the new phone system, $80,000, and that's going to be installed soon. Your computer software and licensing, that seems to have doubled from last year, although it's just a little higher than 21-22. What computer software and licensing are we talking about there?
And that is the replacement of the Sophos
Sophos,
software.
okay, perfect, thank you.
Sure.
So the capital outlay, computers, office equipment, somewhere you're accounting for the replacement costs of all those laptops that we put out.
So that's Fund 125.
Yeah.
Fund 125 receives a request and receives a transfer from the general fund for the replacement of general fund computers.
Okay.
And so it's up to the committee to decide how much to transfer.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so on the subject of 125, I missed that. So we actually met with our Dell rep recently, and they mentioned that our current infrastructure, they think that 7 years is what the expected lifespan of that should be versus the 5 that we were looking at. We had 2025 as being our apocalypse, where all of the infrastructure that we had to get through for the ransomware and all of the laptops that we had to get for COVID, which both happened in early 2020, that all of that was going to come due in 2025. So talking to Dell, I actually just purchased some RAM to make sure that we've got enough capacity to get us through at least one more year. Personally, I think 6 years is reasonable. 7 gets me a little bit nervous, but I can buy us another year or so just with some licensing. It would be a difference of costing us about $30,000 to get another year's worth of warranty and maintenance and licensing compared to about $200,000 of equipment. So I know Sean has talked to me about not getting the $200,000 put into the 125 fund. I can manage that for a year, but that does put us to a point where we can't really kick that can down the road again. We will need to account for, we will need some money in the next 2 years for sure to be able to get us through that big bubble that we've got. But yeah, I think 1 year of having that non-funded, I can manage that. Okay, it's just, it makes it a little harder the next year to, if budgets are even worse, it's much harder for me to be okay with not getting the money that time.
So is it possible to split the years then, so that we're not doing everything all in 1 year?
So we can break apart the big laptop purchase and the infrastructure, but that infrastructure, that $200,000 has to be a one shot because it's replacing pretty much half a rack's worth of equipment with the next one, and you can't. We could do it partially, but now you're paying the licensing for the old stuff and at a much higher risk of that going, something going down and losing that. It would cost more to do it over a period of 2 or 3 years versus just a one-time replace everything all at once.
Okay, that's kind of what I meant is, did we have to do all the laptops and this, or could we do that and the laptops the next year? So we're just kind of splitting those out, not splitting the project.
Right, and initially we were going to have to do it all at once, but after my conversation with Dell, I'm very comfortable pushing out the infrastructure a year, so at least we'll have one year's difference, and I'm hopeful that whatever we get, we can do 6 years on that as well, to give us a good 2 year, 3 year cushion to let us build up a little bit more in the between years to kind of smooth that curve out a bit.
Okay.
So the members will remember, we had kind of an apocalypse in 2019 and 2020.
Yeah, the last year.
2019, we had a security incident, and our backups weren't sufficient. So we have really worked very hard on making sure our backups are sufficient, bringing in new servers. Are we up in the cloud at all?
We do have backups now in the cloud. In short, it's an immutable backup, which means they cannot be overwritten, which was what did us in 2020. They managed to pretty much destroy our existing backups. But yeah, at this point we have 3 different sets of backups between the courthouse, the sheriff's office, and possibly the library. And then another set in the cloud. We can survive the 2020 incident pretty well unscathed. Unfortunately, that's not what they do anymore. Now it's more, they will still encrypt it just on the off chance your backups are bad. But what they're looking for is they're going to exfiltrate all of your data and then, hey, pay us or we're going to make all this public. And that's how they get you now. So I am working with vendors to try to find some additional security to help defend against the evolving attacks that they're giving us.
And of course, the other half of that apocalypse was pandemic. And we needed to really get out a vast number of laptops so that people could work from home. The courthouse was closed for a while there. And so that's the equipment that we're talking about that needs to be replaced. We thought in 5 years, maybe now in 7 years. When you're looking at, with all the laptops that we distributed within a year's period, although the pandemic started, that sort of started a clock ticking as far as replacement goes. So, I mean, these things just sort of build on each other. So it's a difficult situation, but this county is probably in the best shape that it's been for a long time when it comes to our security, but it's a moving target. It is a moving target. One other question I have here, Jeff, so you've got a line item, R&M office equipment for $40,000.
Yes, so that's that's our wireless, our non-capital expenses. And let me pull those up.
So one thing I'll make mention of is I asked Jeff pulled all of the telephone expenses out of the general fund departments, and they're all in IS now.
Okay.
So,
Yep.
That's why there's no history on that one.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it looks like Dell is your vendor of choice here. I'm looking around the room, everybody has a Dell, and I'm pretty familiar with them. Do you buy these through the state of Oregon contract? Is that who the vendor is with the state? What's your contractual arrangements with Dell?
I don't know the exact contract, but and Dell is kind of interesting. We qualify for quite a few different government contracts. So Dell is good about finding us the best, whichever one offers the best deal when we're getting those. I want to say HVAR, which I don't know what that stands for, but I know that term. I believe that's probably what we normally buy off of, but I'd have to.
The state of Oregon will have some sort of contract with maybe one or more vendors, and counties and cities, any public agency can be part of that if you have an agreement with the state of Oregon. And the pricing is usually relatively attractive because they're buying them by the thousands or tens of thousands, whatever it is, cars or computers. So that was my question. If I walked into an office in Salem, would I see the same thing?
You would see the same things, just at a significant increased cost. We've got, there's the Oregon contract, but there's also a Western States, there's NASPO, which I believe is a national. There are quite a few different contracts that we qualify for, so it really does make it a little bit easier on us. They do a good job of.
So what's the cost? Is that a 14 or 13 and a half, 14 inch?
I believe this is a 13. These ran about 1,300 and change. One of the things that we've done in the last 6 months is realized that almost nobody ever takes their laptop and turns it into a tablet. So we now get a 15-inch that is just a laptop. It can't fold into a tablet. It includes a 10 key, which people love, and it saves us about $100 per device, maybe even $200. I can't remember the cost offhand, but we're actually getting devices that people are happier with at a cheaper cost just because we did away with a feature that nobody uses. So
I, for
I'm
one,
always-
didn't even know we could do that.
Most people don't.
So Jeff, a quick question on your staffing.
Yes.
You have 8 staff, I think, listed in your budget. Are all 8 of these currently filled?
So at the moment, we are down 2 positions. My old position and our GIS position who just recently resigned.
Okay, perfect.
Just so everyone knows, I have asked Jeff to hold off on the replacement of the GIS position. We're looking at budgets again in the county very, very closely. And this is one of those, yeah, it's great, would be great to have a GIS person. But is it absolutely necessary for this county at this point in time? You have to make that determination.
Any other questions?
Nope, I don't have any.
All right, well, and I think we're good to go forward, and we'll no doubt revisit this again on Thursday afternoon, but so far so good.
Thank you.
All right, and then we also have now communications under the same time slot, and we're close. Close enough. Close enough for government work here.
Also only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades.
Yes. All right. Let's do that. Let's do communications.
So Rachel, I'm not a presenter anymore.
I show you as a presenter.
Yeah, I just have it up for share on the screen.
Okay, so this, we're on 1220 here. What are we doing here on? I gotta go a little further
Department 1550.
There it is. I share it.
Go
Technology with the IS department.
There we go.
I'm not part of the IS department, really. Because I can't even run a computer.
Okay, so this is 1550 here, right?
Correct.
Got it?
Yes.
Okay. All right, somebody start talking, whoever's in charge of that.
John Spence, Only County Communications Administrator for the record. You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
So if you can see this,
Lovely photo.
yeah, that's actually not ours. I stole that because it was so pretty.
It's not one of our towers, huh?
It isn't, but it sure looks a lot like
Not
ours.
enough clouds.
Trees.
Not enough trees.
Go to enemy or slideshow.
Sounds like this one's right down there.
This one?
Now, wouldn't you think that communications and computer people have all this figured out here?
Yeah.
If
you'd
they don't, I
think.
think we're in real trouble.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about good things that we did this last year. And I do a lot of work with the sheriff's office. I think most people know that. Take care of their fleet, work a lot with Matt and the staff. This year they had a couple of big projects. We moved their backup EOC, and we made a tidy little corner for them in their new room. That was kind of a bear. We had to move everything over and extending lines and things, so that's what that looks like. On the right, part of that system is having satellite phone connectivity in case we lose our terrestrial communications. And that picture on the right there is the tall one, that's a satellite antenna. The one we had before was grossly inadequate, it was not working properly, so we went ahead and fixed that. The antenna on the left, the green one, that's actually part of a project we did the year before for the jail communications. Before they couldn't even talk to each other from the control room out to the booking, and now they can actually hear each other. So that's a pretty cool deal. Rockaway City Hall did a lot of work this year over there. Rockaway City Hall is actually one of our radio sites, and that's because Rockaway sits in kind of a pocket between North County and Central County. And so my predecessor put in a system that had some problems, so we went ahead and revamped that. The picture on the left, we separated the antennas, put a brand new one on the southeast corner and on the northwest corner, and what I've heard from Chief Hess up there is communications have gotten a lot better. And now that SO has taken over the patrol duties for Rockaway, it's a big deal for them because they share that system as well, and their communications have gotten a lot better. So that was a good deal. Triangulation Point out in the woods. Most people don't know where it is unless you're a hunter. We operate a site out there, and really what it does is help to support Highway 6 and anything north of there. So if we have a search and rescue, or if we have an injury out on Diamond Mill or the ATV area, this is the channels that the first responders are going to use. So one of the things I'm going to be asking for in my budget is a battery bank. These are very expensive. The system you see there is about 12. They cost about $3,500. This site runs on batteries all alone. It has no power from BUD, so these are pretty important. So we rotate these every 2 years because they power up and they discharge every day, and they only last about 2 years. That's why they're so expensive, but they do get work out. The picture in the middle, we had an old generator up there, again from my predecessor. This year we got some grant money and we put the one in on the right, and it's a much more robust system, and that's what's going to run up there when we don't have the ability to have solar and wind.
So your backup fuel is the propane, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We did last year. I asked for some money, and I was granted it. We retired a very old, antiquated camera system, and I'm starting to deploy them at all of our prime sites. And what I mean by that is our main sites, so where the main communication is going on in the county. On the left there, so we're actually taking the data over cellular now because it's so much faster and it's cheaper. And the networking hardware that you see there is kind of a puzzle to put together, but I worked with IS and we got that all in our internal communications. And then there again is a camera that's watching our door at Mount Hebo. And this is the kind of thing, the pictures that we're collecting, so I can see what's going on. Obviously Mount Hebo's still got a ton of snow. Neoconi there in the middle looks a lot better. And then Cape Meare's up here to our west. So this is kind of real-time data I can get without having to jump in the truck and go up and look see what it's like. So it saves a lot of money, time, and labor. This is a sore spot with me. Last summer we put this generator in, and ultimately it failed after about 27 hours. So that's what I've been doing for the last month, is stressing on this. But this is one of our key partnerships with Public Works. That's them there on the bottom with the crane. I work with them all the time, and they're tremendous. And I couldn't do what I do without them. So we took an old, antiquated generator. We put the new one up there that I thought was going to be good because all the cell carriers use them. I thought they must be great. Well, I got a limit, so I'm going to be working on fixing that this summer.
Was that what you guys had to get up to address in the snowstorm?
Yes.
I heard that story.
Why isn't it moving now?
Sometimes it takes a while to
Catch up.
show up on these screens. Maybe beat your laptop or something.
All right. I don't know why it froze, but I'm just going to start talking. So, the end of this year, so I'm going to go through the budget narrative that I prepared for Sean. Personnel is not going to change, just going to be myself, so one full FTE. The non-cap equipment is one of my bigger line items. This year is going to be about a 21% decrease in what I've asked for last year. And what I do with this particular GL is I focus on backup, resiliency, and efficiency in our system. So we actually retire about 2 sets of radios and amplifiers and power supplies per year. That's kind of what I've been averaging historically. And I need to keep spares on the shelf ready to go, otherwise so I have something to put in as soon as they fail. So I want to keep that inventory up as much as I can. Going on to the camera stuff, which I've been doing last year, now we want to move into site monitoring. So I want to collect as much environmental information as I can. What's the wind speed? Is the sun out? What are all of the systems doing? What's the health of them? And I can actually tie them into the system that we've already created with cameras and start collecting that information. A battery bank annual rotation, I've got 2 sites coming up for that as well, so I'm going to be asking for that. I had to deploy a new generator at L190 this year because mine failed, so I have no spares at the moment, so I'd like to have another one in the shop to be able to put in immediately if that one goes down. I'm down to only 1 antenna as a spare because I have to deploy them over the years because they get damaged by wind, they get infiltrated by water and that type of thing. So if I have them on the shelf ready to go, I don't have to wait and be at the mercy of vendors. And then my last major one here is I'm asking for an outfitting package for a work truck, but I'll get into that a little bit later. I don't know what it's doing. It's just frozen.
Oh, there it goes.
Okay. Computer software and licensing, that's going to be a 25% increase from the prior fiscal year. That's all Jeff's fault. Mostly that's just the team's AV, the cost of Ring Central, and I'm going to have a desk phone. And then every year it seems like Kenwood ups the price for their programming software, which is what I use to program the radio fleet for the county. So I'm going to have to purchase another one of those. Contracted services, another big one for me. But this year I'm going to ask for about a 28.5% decrease. And what this GL allows me to do is cover all the PMIs for our sites. We do that once every 1 to 2 years. We want to keep an eye on the health of the system, so I have an independent contractor come and do that for me so that we have a record from a third party that makes sure that someone else has vetted it besides me. I want to keep some money in there for our Blaine. We're contractually obligated to maintain the Blaine Road sirens through the Benville Water and Light agreement we have with them, so I have to cover the cost of that. And I always like to have money in there for a tower crew in case they have to come out and climb 200 feet towers, which I'm not able to do on my own. So that's some of the major bulk of that GL. I'm going to have to figure out a solution in Mount Hebos, and what I'm thinking now is I don't have any faith in the generator that went bad on me, so I'm going to probably take that out, have it warranted, repaired, probably put it on some type of a trailer so I have a mobile unit to take all over the county, or even give it to other departments if they need it for any purpose. And I'm going to have to find a new solution, go with another generator up there to replace the one I put in, to something that's going to be vetted across the board, I guess. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I want to put some money in there to hedge for that.
So I just think it's interesting. I mean, anytime you buy equipment, I mean, you get a limit. And I think that's probably what this one is. But so you don't like the company or that particular generator?
So typically what I do is I look around and see what the professional commercial companies are doing, and people like Verizon and T-Mobile, they've got thousands of sites across the world, so they use brands, and I basically just copy that. I'm like, oh look, I see 4 of those at their sites this year. Those must be good. Talk to their manager. Yeah, these are great. I don't know. I just got a bad one. So now I'm a little hesitant. So I'm thinking maybe a different solution might make you feel a little bit better. So.
If you don't mind if I go back in your budget just a bit?
Absolutely.
So under contracted services, in 2021, 22, you were at over 450,000 and over 280,000. And then in 22, 23, you were at 49,000 and your requested budget is 35. What are the huge numbers a couple of years ago?
So you might remember that the influx of the COVID dollars, the broadband money from the government, which Rachel and I worked on together,
okay.
There were huge amounts of money, and I
Utilized it.
yes.
That was so we didn't have, so now we have a dedicated broadband fund because of the federal money we're getting. But before that, we were just using the communications budget as the fund to support the Biz Oregon money, the 338, all the stuff that we were, Samantha, all of that.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, good catch.
I wasn't thinking in terms of COVID. Thank you. Thank you, John.
Travel, training, and mileage. I've utilized some of that this year. In fact, I just got back from a conference from Hood River. That's going to be a significant decrease from last year. What I would like to do this next fiscal year is You might recall back in 2020, we got an ODF grant, and I purchased a really nice analyzer that we would otherwise not been able to afford. And I'd like to go get some training on that. I was going to go in 21, but it was canceled because of COVID restrictions, so didn't get a chance to do that. Some of the significant changes are the public safety radio project Rachel and I have been working on. Last year, the pace just kind of slowed. That is still going on. I spent significantly less time on that project because we weren't doing as much. It did allow more time for me to be in the field and to do some more administrative tasks in the office, which I'm always seem to be catching up on. I'm asking for kind of a marked decrease across the board in most of my GL accounts because we can't accomplish many of the goals we set forth in the last fiscal year. So travel, training, mileage, contracted services, R&M for the building and grounds, and R&M for equipment are all going to be going down in my ask. Some of the more modest increases are going to be office supplies, which is a tiny fraction of my budget anyway. Small tools and minor equipment. Over the last few years, I built up a pretty good supply, and now I'm just maintaining it. Computer software and licensing gone up a little bit. Rent's going up. That goes up every year. Those increases are built into all of our contracts and leases that we have with the partners that we use. And then R&M vehicles, I'll talk a little bit more of that in detail, but that continues to go up every year as the vehicle gets older. The big money I'm asking for, once again, a larger generator to place at Mount Hebo, and I'm going to reutilize the old one for a spare or some auxiliary purpose. That's what the trailer is in there for too, to somehow utilize to make kind of a rolling asset out of this. And two big asks I'm going to toss for it. I am going to ask for a work truck this year. And I'm going to go into that into detail in a second. And also that includes all the gear that's going to have to go with it to outfit that. So my total requested capital purchases is about $93,000. And this is kind of what my budget looks like this year. Green is last fiscal year, orange is this fiscal year. Like I said, most of them are going down, if not remaining about equal to the fiscal year prior, except the vehicle that I've asked Sean for. And on the right there.
Yeah, and general fund vehicles aren't in general fund departments. They come out of the Vehicle Reserve Fund 131. That's why you don't see the cost of the vehicle in the communications budget, just the outfitting of it. The cost of the vehicle is in Fund 131.
And so you'll see it on the far right there, that large orange. I didn't have any of that the prior fiscal year. And the machinery and equipment, which I went over a little bit earlier in capital purchases, that's reflected in that bar graph there. So I don't know if you guys had any questions on that, but that's good visual. So I am asking for a new vehicle, and I believe that this is the same body that's going to be considering that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why. My department hasn't had a new vehicle since 2003. It was a small Ranger that my predecessor bought. It was totaled in 2018. Sheriff Long at that point graciously donated a rarely used detective truck to us, which already had quite a few miles on it. It's a 3/4 ton. It doesn't handle the weight of the required gear that I carry. The engine is undersized for many of the demands I put on it. It can't tow very heavy trailers very well, which I find myself doing a lot these days. The canopy leaks. It doesn't allow for adequate sealing against an environment, and it rains here all the time. My back seat is basically unusable except for everything but storage sensitive equipment. Anything longer than 6 feet, like my tower mounts, my antennas, my ladders, I have to borrow a county vehicle from another department to do that. And I've set it up as best I could for the last 5 years, and I've made do with it. I just think now the maintenance costs are going up. It's got high mileage, operates in tough working conditions, and I think it's time for a change. And I think that we do a lot with a little, but I think we can do better on this particular front. I wanted to give you guys a little show here. So this is what the Ranger up in the left-hand corner, that's what we started out with. Then the Sheriff's Department gave me this one, and this is what it looks like at the bottom here. That's how we kind of outfitted for the mission that we do on a daily basis. And you'll see that all the gear that I carry around, it takes up the entire truck, but I can't leave it in the back because it'll be damaged by the rain and the moisture that collects. If you see in the picture on the bottom, I don't know if you can see the water there, but it just collects. And it's very hard on the equipment. And the way it is now, the truck sits so low in the back, if I put any kind of weight on it, it's putting a tremendous amount of burden on the vehicle. So I think at this point, I'm going to be looking for a different solution. And
Is that a four-wheel drive, all-wheel drive?
The current one I have is 4-wheel drive.
And that's what you wanted?
Correct. What I'm asking for is a 1-ton 4-wheel drive pickup. Something like that would be more appropriate to the jobs that we do on a daily basis. And to protect the investment that we've made as a county, probably upwards of $100,000 of equipment that we need to carry any given day. Because going up to a site and coming back and going up and coming back is just not
Is
worth
that vehicle on a state contract or buying it elsewhere?
it.
Another agency's buying the same thing, you know?
Other agencies are buying things that are similar, and I did get a state pricing from Ford. I guess that's a GSA contract, is that
Yeah, the state, the
NASPO maybe?
gas, yeah.
So I've got a quote prepared from them, and I handed Dr. Shawn, it should be in your budget packet.
I noticed you mentioned Kenwood on something. Are you having good luck with Kenwood products?
I have great luck with Kenwood products. They are very resilient and robust, and they're proven. Motorola is their biggest competitor. They're very expensive and they're very proprietary. And at this point, I'm very happy with the product that we use them pretty much across the board.
Well, they're big in amateur radio, as you may know. So they've been around a long time, that's why I asked.
And one more thing on the car, we are going to be able to reutilize many of the accessories that I put on it. So the winch, the lights, all the stuff can be ripped out and put into the new one. So we'll save quite a bit of money there. And also, the used truck market is still pretty strong. So somebody out there somewhere would make use of the one we have, so we could recoup probably 10% of the cost, a surplus in the old one. So, something to consider.
I was wondering about the accessories, because didn't you just get those last year?
I've been building them over the past 5 years. Some of them I got last year. The majority of the major ones I got right when I got it.
Okay. And have you tried to get the lead fixed?
I've sealed it to the best of my ability. I worked with Roy over at E&E. I had to have it painted about 2 years ago because the paint was peeling off of it, and then we tried to seal it with the best products we had, and it just doesn't. The canopy wasn't really made for that vehicle specifically, so tried to do everything I can.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Nope.
All right, thank you. Okay, we're a little behind now, but let's see if we can power through Juby, and then we'll take maybe a short break and then continue on with the rest of the day. So we're going to move to juvenile.
Good afternoon, everyone.
1510, right? Go ahead.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Matt Tennell, the Juvenile Department Director, and just in case anybody wants a quick rundown of what we do, most of what we do is found in the statute, is governed by the statutes, Chapter 419C of the Oregon Revised Statutes. And this is a very rough overview. We receive referrals from local law enforcement agencies, and we work with the youth and their families who are the subject of those. We do offer informal and formal interventions. In response to those, we also appear in court for those cases that go to court. We provide supervision of both the informal and the formal matters, and we have partnerships and ongoing collaboration with local agencies like DHS and Tacoma Family Counseling to fill that function. As far as our budget for 23-24, I think the juvenile department budget is probably one of the more straightforward and simple budgets in the county. I think I'm continuing a pretty strong historical trend of not asking for a whole bunch. I think this is not a large number, but I think our total budget asked for this fiscal year is less than last fiscal year. Our big, we just don't have the big ticket items like the IS or communications do. Our biggest ticket items are our personnel costs. Obviously, we have myself and our two legal assistants are both longtime county employees. Longtime county employees. We have two probation officers who are newer to the county, which instantly does make our office fully staffed, which is nice. So we have personnel, we have contracted services, and we have our detention line item, which is, the ask for that is smaller than this year. That was me trying to bring, the budgetary request more in line with what we actually spend. And we don't, our demands on our budget is, it fluctuates a lot from year to year, just kind of depends on what's going on. And I'm jumping around a little bit. I think our anticipated revenue is a little bit more than previous, because that is me, more accurately presenting what we do have coming into the office, because there was the criminal fines dollars that Sean alerted me to not terribly long ago that I didn't even realize we were getting. So we split those, but those are that's a biennial grant. That's one of, I think, 3 biennial grants that kind of supplements our budget. We split those payments with the sheriff's office, so the sheriff's office can use some of that. And again, this is not a large number of increased revenue, but it is an increase. And other than that, I don't have a lot of narrative information. I did make some notes in my budget prep about we are getting reimbursed, but this might be new to the budget committee. We are getting reimbursed for expunging juvenile records, which is one of our statutory mandates. The state is reimbursing all the counties for conducting the expungement of juvenile records. And the state rate for that is $206.15. So, however many of those we do in a quarter, we send a reimbursement request to the state, and they actually just signed one today. So that's why I was able to kind of give you that detailed information. And then our grants, the juvenile crime prevention grant dollars are slightly decreased from for the 23-25 biennium than they were for the 21-23 biennium. It's not a large amount, but it is decreased a little bit. That's not a backbreaker for us. But unless anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has those.
Thanks, Matt. My one question isn't so much about the budget, it's about how many kids you serve, because I remember us talking about how the numbers of kids you served during COVID dropped, and I wondered if they've come back and how it compares.
So they have come back, and I'm glad you asked, because I just submitted one of our grant plans, and the most recent, and anybody can look at these numbers, there's the Oregon Youth Authority hosts and pays for our juvenile justice information system, and that system is filled with data, and the Oregon Youth Authority publishes reports for the state and each individual county that are all available online. And the most recently available, and I don't recall what time period this captured, but we had 67 kids referred to us for 105 individual acts. So there's basically 105 referrals that 67 kids were responsible for. 105 referrals is still low. It's coming back.
Over what period of time?
I believe it's a 1-year period of time. I don't believe that we have recovered where our referral numbers were pre-COVID. I don't think any county in Oregon has. And there's some legislative changes that I think is probably going to impact our numbers to the end of increasing them. There's a minimum age bill that is making its way through the legislature right now that will open the door to juvenile departments serving a younger population than we serve now. Not to the exclusion of other agencies, but bringing the juvenile department into the fold also. But to the short answer is no, we have not recovered our pre-COVID numbers. I think they are increasing. Court-wise, we are much busier in court than we were during 2020-21. So we're appearing in court a lot more. The court is keeping statistics, and I think at a recent LIPSIC meeting, Judge Hill says that their juvenile docket was 700% more active. I don't know what metrics were involved in that. That seemed really high to me, but anyway, we are busier in that sense.
Matt, like you say, it's a simple, pretty straightforward budget, so we appreciate it very much.
Okay, thank you.
Sean, did you pull anything or pull anything out for our contingency conversation?
So the only thing that I would look at is just if you look at historically, the detention contract, and we've discussed why it's been so high in the past. There was an incident, and so there's been funds left in there. So you're trying to keep some contingency in yours, but then we have the general fund contingency. If I pulled some of that out of there and put that in there, if it was needed, it'd be there. It's just not in two budgets.
Oh, okay,
Is that?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're trying to, we're finding that we're somewhat duplicating our contingency.
Okay.
The departments are putting it in, and
Yeah.
Sean is putting it in.
So I believe the number I put in the detention contract for this, the daily rate is $168.
Right.
Our main provider is Yamhill County. I believe the number I put in for 23-24 is just a little bit more than, I think I put enough in there to have one kid in detention each day of the fiscal year. There has been some discussion, but nothing's been presented to me about a guaranteed access contract with Yamhill County. I know that gives Sean a little bit of heartburn because we would be paying for access to detention when we would not have any kids housed there. I know there's some issues around paying for services that are not being given. But anyway, that's been discussed, but nothing. There's been no approach about that, and I don't know what the cost difference would be. That would probably show, just from a bean counting perspective, that more of that would probably deplete more of those funds throughout the fiscal year, though. That ending balance would probably be less if we did that.
So don't be scared if you get into your account and you discover that we pulled a little bit more out. I
Yeah.
appreciate that you pulled some off for detention.
Yeah.
We're just trying to move away from double contingency,
Got it.
so appreciate that.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. $10. Who's ringing over there?
I'm sorry, I had
Christmas bell.
sucker turned on.
Christmas bell, I know.
Okay, you mentioned, Judge, can you hang on for about another 8 or 9 minutes? We take a short break?
Sure.
All right,
Doug,
let's-
would it be possible for us to do the judge, because I need to remind you, I need
All
to
right,
leave
well,
at
let's
3
do that,
p.m.
if that's-
And I would love to be able to do Citrus Justice Court, and then the other two departments are ones that I'm very familiar with.
Okay,
We
good,
don't
fair
hold-
enough. If that's okay, let's do juvenile court and, justice court, not juvenile court. We'll
Thank
put
you.
them in another courtroom.
Have you guys seen this? The computers fold all the way back over and turn into tablets.
How did I not know that?
Who knew? Who cared? Tell me everyone who knew, who cared already knew.
I mean, there's zero usefulness for that for me, but like, look at that. I learned something new. I built a deck. Do I plug into something?
Oh, I can make you a presenter.
Are you logged into the meeting?
I am not logged into the meeting.
Yeah, log in and I can make you a presenter.
And just please don't be offended if I get up and walk out at 3. I have an appointment, so.
You would not be the first person to walk out on me.
Okay, perfect.
I'm not the first person today, if we're being honest. All right, so
Good to have you in the room, Judge.
you know, normally you guys sandwich me in between the sheriff's office and Bill Porter. So
Is your stuff on?
So
Bill
you
Porter
have
is
Bill-
So no longer having Bill.
He's not on yet.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
all right, so could you
It's
send me?
the regular BOC meeting.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
You guys are asking me to do basic things.
okay,
That-
so this might be faster. I can slow you down. There you go. Sent you the link.
I don't know what kind of magic you two are doing over there,
Nothing's happening.
but.
Well, it depends on how fast the internet goes now.
So in morning, I have to take my son to the airport at 6 a.m. Okay, so there should be plenty of time for me to get here for the meeting, unless something weird happens.
Okay, it looks like I'm
Okay.
on.
We
You will
can
be
have.
here tomorrow.
Of course.
Wrote myself again.
You should be able to
Be
fix
sitting
that now.
behind just all by yourself.
Great faith on the phone somewhere. But, all right, no,
So I have
we
to
will
share
start with that.
screen.
Yeah, okay.
Which is, it's the button that says share. Perfect.
There we go. It'll take a second to show up on our screen. Look at
All
that.
right.
Even that went pretty quick.
Look at that. All that money we give to the technology department seems to have done something. So, and there. We'll note that my wife has made fun of my PowerPoint more than you guys will, so that's a good start. Before we get going, just kind of want to outline what I'm going to be going over here. I'm going to be starting talking about our expenses, kind of where those things are coming from, how those are allocated. Then going to go into revenue, going to be looking a lot at our current numbers. We're actually at the point where I'm starting to compare things to pre-COVID numbers, and so I've put together a couple of slides looking at that. And then everyone's favorite discussion point, looking at you, Doug, is accounts receivable.
I was just thinking about that, how many millions are there?
So I thought I'd end with that for you. So let's just kind of go ahead and get started here. So right now, the expenses that we're requesting total $468,000. I've broken down the amount of that's salaries, taxes and benefits attached to those salaries, and these are all part of our personnel expenses. One thing that I wanted to highlight here with this personnel numbers is right now we're looking at possibly initiating a reclass for our legal assistants. And we have the wage equity study that you guys are much more familiar with than I am. So I always just kind of hesitate here that like these are the numbers that we're working with right now. And these are personnel, so they're pretty much set. Our material and services, this is much more discretionary. And one thing that I note is I'm a bad government worker because I always try to give as much money back as I can, which I've been told again and again and again is the wrong thing to do, that right at the end you spend everything you can. And that's not my plan. And so right now where we're at is we've spent about $3,400 out of a little under $11,000 allocated. I don't see any major expenses coming in the future. And one thing that I always note is that I try to be very, very frugal with our spending. My chair in Chambers finally disintegrated, so I thought about buying a new. Do you know how much these chairs cost? I ended up getting a banker's chair that'd been sitting in Bill Porter's office that he, when he started, cannibalized out of parts he found in various closets throughout the courthouse in the early 90s to make sure that we wouldn't have that expense. And almost everything in my office is personally owned by me. I figured I'm not going to be spending county money on chairs. I'll just use it. So that's one of the things I highlight is our request is going to be for just under $18,000. I don't anticipate us spending all of that. I spend a lot of time, energy, and effort not spending that. So first we have the large increase going from $10,000 to $17,000. The majority of that is not an actual increase in spending, it's a change in where the spending occurs. As you guys know, there's a shift from IS paying for various subscriptions, various computers, and having that go into the departments themselves. So that's where we see the vast majority of that increase. Two things that are statutorily required is we are statutorily required to provide interpreters. Up until this year, we had a native Spanish speaker who could do all of our Spanish interpretation. We no longer have her working with us. There's been a pretty significant amount of turnover in our office, so we are requesting funds for an interpreter. How much of that will actually need to use, because we do have Spanish court with Judge Denise Harrington, I don't know. This is our first year in, I think, seven or 8 years that we didn't have a native speaking Spanish interpreter on staff. So that's going to be expensive. Also, we have our jury list, which is statutorily required to pay the state. I believe, off the top of my head, I believe that's $800. We have received the list. We've not received the bill. That is statutorily required as well. So that the biggest increase, though, is the shifting of expenses from IS over to the courts itself.
So back to the interpreter, does the statute provide that regardless of the language, native language spoken, that you find an interpreter somewhere?
Yes.
So even if it's one of the, say that, I don't know what would be a good example, but one that's, maybe there are only 50 people in the state of Oregon, you'd still be required to find an interpreter.
There is, fun fact, there is a small area in the Yucatan that doesn't speak Spanish. It speaks a offshoot of Mayan, and there's about 160 people worldwide who speak it. The courts are required to have interpreters. We have not had that problem. Benton County has had to find an interpreter for this proto-American language that you could fit everyone who speaks inside the courthouse. It is a statutory requirement that we provide interpretive services if requested. No matter.
You can't find an interpreter.
Well, if you don't have, and there are certain levels of qualification. You want to have a certified interpreter. Certified interpreters are for your major languages, that are widely spoken. If you can't get a certified interpreter, you then have to find a qualified interpreter. That's someone who has been previously determined to be able to speak the language enough to act as an interpreter, but has not passed the certification process. If you can't find a qualified interpreter, then you basically find someone and put them under oath.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, they have to swear that they are able to communicate in the language and that they will translate the language as best they can. But yeah, once you get into these weird things, it starts to get very dicey statutorily.
So in some jurisdictions, that's a fairly significant expense, just across the board.
In quite a few jurisdictions, it is a pretty significant expense. We're lucky that we have Denise Harrington, who is fluent in Spanish and runs our Spanish court. So we actually have court once a month in Spanish for all of our Spanish speakers, which is, I do not want to imagine my life without her, or my budget without her, because she does a fantastic job there. But yeah, a lot of counties spend a lot of money on interpreters. One of the big problems that we've also run into is that most interpreters are based over in the Valley. So it's a lot easier for the Marion County Justice Court to get an interpreter than the Tillamook County Justice Court. For us to get a Spanish interpreter in person, we tried this out earlier. Well, we didn't actually hire anyone. We called around. To get an in-person court-certified Spanish interpreter, they require us to pay at minimum for 4 hours, and they also require full pay for drive time from the Valley. And so we didn't do it. But just because for an in-person interpreter, it wrecks their day to come out here. So right now we're using Language Line, who I think the county's on a general contract with, which is okay. It meets our requirements. It's far from ideal.
So it's a little off the budget number, but I'm just curious. Thank you. That's good. Interesting.
And we hope not to have to delve into that too much, but it is what it is, as they say.
And there are multiple languages available through Language Line.
Yes, yes. I've done English, Punjabi, Chinese, Japanese.
I've seen Mongolian on the
I had to do Russian one time.
Russian,
Language Line
yeah.
and I care, yeah.
Yeah, we do a lot of Russian, Romanian, Ukrainian, Bulgarian.
Great.
Yes. Yes. It's not ideal, but it's good for what it is. And a couple of things. We still have a request for books and publications. We don't use very much of that. I've cut out pretty much all of our books and publication spending. One thing, which is my current eye-rolling, this is dumb, is talking with IS, we're looking at replacing the computer on the bench in the courtroom. If we replace it with another computer, which we don't want to do, IS then covers the expense because it's on
That's Fund
the
125.
Yeah. If we go from having a separate computer to just docking the laptop, which is cheaper and makes sense and is what we want to do, then we get the expense. At least according to my talks with IS. And so we're talking with them on what we're going to do there. We'll sort it out. If we have to have a separate computer, we have to have a separate computer. If we can dock, great. It's just one of those of trying to figure out where the money's coming from, which is a bit down the road. It's not an immediate.
It might take a minute.
I get all excited. Okay, so a couple of things that we're looking at changing. We are going to be experimenting with a 4 10-hour workday. And the reason for that is right now, my staff has very little uninterrupted work time to actually sit down and do things. And so we're hoping that by switching to 410s, because we won't be open the entire time I have staff in the building, they'll have time to actually be able to sit down and work on things. I was talking to Miss Owens on Thursday, who had spent 3.5 hours writing a letter because she starts writing the letter and the phone rings. And then she gets done with that. 2 minutes later, someone's at the front window, and just the constant interruptions make it very, very difficult for her to do her work. Right now, and we're going to get into some citation numbers, right now we are hammered. We are basically triaging work, and in certain areas, if it's not time sensitive, we're basically just not doing it. So in some areas we're about a month behind. During the juvenile presentation, I went up to go grab some water. During that time, while I was filling up my water bottle, we had someone from city police wanting to know where that decision letter is. And it's like, well, it's done, but we haven't sent it out yet. We had people calling in wanting to know where rulings are. They're done. They're just not getting sent out because they're not time sensitive. And so the idea behind this is by having uninterrupted time, they'll actually just be able to sit down and do stuff, which will make it a lot more efficient. We're going to be running this as a trial from June to September. So hopefully we'll be able to see an improvement, see how it works. I'm not married to the idea. I'm trying new things because they're hammered right now. One thing that's also going to be very helpful is City Police is switching over to an electronic filing system, which is going to be a lifesaver because right now we are hand entering all of our citations, which is incredibly time consuming, and hand entering them while being interrupted constantly. So it's a problem, and we're starting to fall behind on citation entry. So hopefully switching over to e-filing will save us.
Do we have a projected date for when the city police will switch over?
So the city police have switched over, they're currently switched over. However, because we're all just super great at everything, no one from their vendor talked to the vendor who runs Magic. And so no one set up them actually being electronically filed. So now they're printing electronic citations, bringing them over, and then we're hand entering them.
Like
Yeah.
government at work.
Are they going to be?
Yes.
Okay.
They started calling us up wanting to know what was going on with cases. We're like, we don't have that case. They're like, it was e-file. No, it wasn't. Just no one talked to it until it actually started and they realized they missed that step. So we're thinking middle of this month. Take that for what it's worth. I will leave you to your own opinion on project deadline projections working with government. Hopeful that will be a significant help to us.
So could you go back to the 410s? What are the county's hours for the security person up front and all? Is that an issue if they come in early and work late, or?
No, the doors lock automatically at 5 and don't open until 8 in the morning, unless you have a key card to get in.
But so they could come to work earlier than that, and
Staff can.
Staff
The public would be, that's why they're going to pursuing this model, because the public would be close to their
okay.
office.
But so then the longer hour is not a problem, and that's the benefit being that you're not interrupted by the public.
And we've talked to IS, we're actually going to just turn our phones off for that. So you want to call and yell at us at 7 in the morning? That's too bad.
Busy signal or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Call back at 8:30 and yell at us.
Okay, go ahead.
Perfect. Projection revenues. Right now, we are still at our 325. We have been very low since 2020. As I think you guys remember, we basically just fell off a cliff at that point. Right now, city police, we're seeing a surge of citations because city police is engaging in very, very heavy traffic enforcement. They have one officer who is assigned specifically to traffic enforcement. And they have another officer who is, if you're looking at just ticket count, Vanderhoff and Martinez are by far our two big tickets. They're probably half of the tickets we see those two guys.
I was working on a commission.
You know, it's a lot. The good news, though, is I know exactly where they're running speed at all times because they have 3 spots they go to. We're also seeing increase in small claims and FEDs. One thing I am going to note is that I've been spending a lot of time with this data, and my wife is an economist who does economic projections, and I've talked to her about this. There are not meaningful patterns I can find in this data. So I'm always somewhat cautious because the things that I'm looking for aren't occurring. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. So when I'm talking about projections, I don't know. This is far from my area of expertise. I begged my way to get through statistics in college, so I'm probably the wrong person to be doing statistical analysis. But here is our number of citations, and I just took last month. The only month in the last decade, last March, that was close to where we were was March in 2015 and 2016. And I brought up the total revenue for those 2 years compared to where we are. When I say the analysis is basically meaningless, this is what you run into a whole bunch. You get more tickets in March of 15 than you do in 16, and yet 2016 has more money come in. I don't know why.
Stupid fines on the, yeah, that you'd have to do some digging.
Same judge, both years. And it's not only the fines. One of the things that we're going to get to when we get to accounts receivable is I'm a much more aggressive finer than previous courts, which is driving up our accounts receivable. But I can't find a pattern here. So I'm not saying because we're at 502 citations this month, we'll be in the $400,000 range. This is just kind of our comparison to last month.
And is that 502 citations for the month of March only?
Yes.
The first 23 days?
Yes.
Okay, and it's twice as many as you had this time last year?
March, yes. Yes.
Okay. That's a lot of tickets.
A week to go.
So does the city police have some sort of mandate to write tickets right now, or are they trying to accomplish something, or why are they doing it?
You would have to ask city police.
Okay.
My guess, and we're going to get to actual numbers here with how much money they're making. I don't think it's a ticket for profit scheme. What I'm thinking is that they are probably going with Highway 6 is one of the more dangerous roads.
So they may have a mandate to try to get people to slow down.
My guess is they're doing what we refer to as high visibility enforcement tactics.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not those have an actual effect on citation, there's some correlation, there's not good cause. Whether or not those are the right things to do, I have no opinion on. That ain't my business. And they haven't told me. I'm guessing.
Well, the reason I ask is you look at those numbers, they're basically almost doubling your workload with their work effort, right?
Yes. One of the interesting things about this job is my workload and my staff's workload is entirely dependent on outside sources. If we have cops out there writing tickets, we're hammered. If we have people filing small claims and FEDs, we're busy. So it's this kind of weird thing where I have absolutely no control over how much stuff comes through. And one of the interesting things that we found, there we go. So right now, from last year, we're on a 38.6 increase in citations year to date. Now, one of the interesting things here is that a citation from cite to court date is generally about 30 days. You get a court date down on the bottom, says come in, it's about 30 days out. So, by the way, the bars are this year. The red line with the dots is last year. So you look at January, right? We crushed the amount of citations we got last year in January. So based off of that, February should have had an increase in revenue because the people cited in January come to court and pay their fines in February, right? Because that would make sense. We actually had a decrease in county revenue year to date in February. Why? Only thing I can kind of surmise is that it's the who has the tickets, who's writing the tickets, because we have the fee sharing agreement with the through IGAs with the different municipalities. So we increased the amount of people in court and decreased the amount of money that was brought in for the county during the same time period.
Way to go.
You're welcome.
You're giving too much of it away then.
Okay.
Is that what's happening?
What's this? You guys talk to these commissioners who do these IGAs. Don't look at me for that.
Well, when people get a ticket, you can pay your ticket in full and don't have to bother going to court, right?
Correct.
Or they come and see you and you give them a little off, right?
Well, when I say I'm a bit more aggressive, so historically what most courts do is you can pay your fine just directly, then you pay the presumptive fine amount. You can write the court a letter and ask for a reduction. If you show up, then you're somewhere in between minimum and maximum. What a lot of courts do and what we've done historically is if you show up and you have a bad driving record, you get the presumptive fine amount. I don't do that. I think that we have maximums for a reason, and I am less shy about using maximum fines. I had a gal this morning who was on her 5th speeding ticket in the last 2 years. She's not getting the presumptive fine amount. And she was very unhappy, and my guess is she's going to watch her speed the next time she's in Tillamook County. So when you say you can come in and get a bit knocked off, a lot of people do, because a lot of the people who come in have clean driving records and, made a mistake. But I always caution people that coming in means that you are now at my mercy, and if you have a bad driving record, you are not going to be a happy person leaving my courtroom. So I wanted to clarify that. One thing that's interesting that has come out during COVID that we see reflected here, though, is that normally our citation counts work off of an inverted bell curve. In the summer, when we have a bunch of tourists, they're super high. When it gets nasty, they go down. And then right around May, they start to go back up. Since COVID, it's been like this. There is no bell curve. It's just up, down, up, down, up, down. And so that's frustrated my data analysis. Most of this is going to be me complaining about how all this stuff makes no sense to me.
But you're showing us on this slide that other than February, you're higher for every month this year.
And other than September, it's not even been close. I mean, October we were 160 tickets above, so 50% increase. Like, it's consistently that level of increased citations.
So what other factors would help tease that data out? Because unless I'm misinterpreting this, all I'm seeing is numbers of citations and value of money. Mm-hmm. And so obviously there's a lot of variables in there, dismissal, who shows up. What would help tease that out? Because it seems like the answers, you can find the answer, but what are the pieces to...
There is something there. And I'm going to be coming to something that is going to touch on that a little bit. What I think is a couple of things. Number one, obviously state statutes have a lot of impact. In 2020, there was House Bill 4210. It removed our ability to suspend driver's license for failure to comply. I don't think that has had a significant impact, and I'll go into that why, but that was one factor. I think a lot of it is economic factors. whether or not people have money. When the stimulus checks came out during COVID, we would all of a sudden see large amounts of payments coming in. Tax time, when people get tax returns, we see an increase in payments coming in. So I think a lot of it is outside economic factors. I also think some of it, and this is me kind of, I don't have anything to back this up, but I also think part of it also involves the cultural zeitgeist. We see a tremendous amount of people failing to appear, their license gets suspended, and then they just never show back up again. There's one individual who I have personally fined, and this is my first term, on driving while suspended and driving uninsured, almost $100,000 in my first term. I've been
He
here.
used to work for me, I know who it is.
And you don't, because he's not alone. There's a bunch of people like that. It's one of those things that, as it seems within certain subsections of society, that it's part of the cultural zeitgeist. I would say the best thing we could do to really figure it out is, though, take a look at the economic data and what events correlate to increases in money coming in. If that answers your question. Short answer, I don't know. So here's our current filings, and I did a comparison here between current and then pre-COVID numbers. We'll see here that both FEDs and small claims are up significantly.
Is FED a eviction?
Yes, sorry, forcible entry and unlawful detainer. It's an eviction. So those are up 87% year to date. And we are at the top end of our pre-COVID FED filings. Small claims have not recovered. They're getting higher. They haven't really recovered to the 150, 200 that we would see pre-COVID. One thing to be aware of, though, with FEDs is during 2020, there was a significant period where there were no filings allowed. Our glorious overlords in Salem have decided to change FED law about once every 4 months. I did a training in February for my staff on just, hey, this is the overall how FEDs work. That training was valid for 23 days until House Bill 2001 passed, which fundamentally changed the procedural stance of FED cases, changed the timelines, changed the underlying process, changed the notices, changed all of our forms, and they're undoubtedly going to change them all again in about 3 to 4 months. So, hooray. But we are back at pre-pandemic levels on FEDs. Small claims aren't there. They're increasing, not there.
So under small claims, the plaintiffs, what percent of the plaintiffs are individuals versus a company? In other words, if companies, are they becoming more aggressive, or are there fewer of them as a result of COVID? Or if Joe owes Sally $100, Joe can sue Sally for $100. What about the companies? Are they more aggressive or less? I'm just looking at the mix.
Yeah, so we do get a lot of, probably 2/3, give or take, are from companies, but it's collection companies.
Yeah.
We don't see a whole lot of individual companies doing their own suits. There's a couple that do, but it's relatively uncommon. Generally, it's individuals. Okay. Accounts receivable. Right now, we're just under, or just over, $4.8 million. We're at a 7.6 year-to-date increase. I think this is, again, House Bill 4210, which removed the ability to suspend for failure to comply. A lot of courts are focusing a lot on that. I think it's overstated because the reality is most of the people who aren't paying just don't show up, and so they get a license suspension for failing to appear as opposed to failure to comply. That said, the data is really difficult here because House Bill 4210 came out 2 months before we had the lockdown for COVID. And so how much of this is 4210, how much of this is COVID, I genuinely couldn't tell you. What we currently do to collect, we do failure to appear license suspensions. Under the statute, if someone enters into a payment plan and makes one payment, we are then statutorily required to or lift our suspension. If someone then, though, breaks the payment agreement, we're able to resuspend on the original failure to appear suspension. And so each month I go through every case that's paying us and make sure that we are receiving payments. Once someone is missing payments or they've failed to appear, had their license suspended, and then having contacted us, I generally hold those cases for about 4 or 5 months to see if people will, once they get their license suspension notice, whether they'll give us a call. After that, though, I send it to our collection agency, which is Credits Incorporated. Been looking, and one of the things that we talk about quite a bit at conferences with the other judges is what can people do to try, because this is, as you can probably guess, a universal thing. So one of the things that we can do is House Bill 4210 removes the ability to suspend for failure to comply. What a lot of courts are doing is they'll just start setting hearings for people. Eventually they'll miss one and then suspend them on an FTA. I'm not doing that. And the reason I'm not is pretty straightforward. I think that would be me subverting the purpose of the law. I think it's a dumb law, but I think a lot of laws are dumb laws. I don't get to just figure out ways around them if I don't like them. So I'm not doing that, and I give them a bit of a tongue lashing every time I see them at these conferences. The other thing is ORS 161-685 allows for contempt, and then warrants issued and people get arrested for criminal contempt. This is floated by quite a few counties. This, by the way, is a horrifically bad idea. Ignoring the fact that it's basically setting up debtors' prisons, which have been unconstitutional since 1970, the bigger issue here is that if you criminally charge someone with contempt, you have to provide them with a court-appointed attorney. And as a previous court-appointed attorney, they ain't free for the state. We gotta pay them. And so there are some courts that have been pushing for people to start doing contempts to haul people in and say money or jail. The couple that have tried it have done very little with it and end up losing money because they have to pay for attorneys. And anytime, if you just Google arrest for fines, the first words that you'll see is the phrase, after a Department of Justice investigation, and I try to avoid things that have Department of Justice investigation attached to them. But other than that, statutorily, there's not a whole lot we can do. We send stuff to collections, we assign them cases for garnishments, but...
I have one question, and I know we're a little over time here, so I want to make sure everybody gets his questions in, but this 4.8 million, when does that number, how far back does that go?
20 years.
20 years.
Kind of. So violations are quasi-criminal, quasi-civil. They're a civil case that involves criminal procedures, except not all the criminal procedures. Under our validity of judgment statutes, a civil criminal case violations are valid for 20 years. Unless, as part of that case, there is an order of restitution, which then makes it valid for 50 years. So the 4.8 million is going back 20 years, and except in some cases it can go back further than that because it has an order of restitution. Those are fairly rare. And we do each month go through and close out our 20-year-old cases. So this is accurate as of last month.
Well, if you could collect 10% of that, you'd double your budget. Of course, I know you share the revenues with others, but
And it's unconstitutional for courts to self-fund. And so we give it to Sean and allow you guys to dole it back to us at your discretion. Kind of a quick summation. No real significant changes. The big change is illusory because it's just coming from somewhere else. We are seeing significant increases in citations, and we are taking some steps to maximize our efficiency without increasing. One thing I say at pretty much every budget meeting is I'm fully aware you guys aren't going to be throwing us an extra person. So we've been working hard with Jackie Jackie Rogers, my court administrator, to maximize our efficiency to try to make it so we're future-proof. So next month, if we get 800 citations, what are we going to do? How are we going to process this? Accounts receivable are likely to go up just because of limited options for collections, and that I go after people pretty hard, especially when they're repeat offenders. Ultimately, I just always remind people these are estimations at best. Data's kind of all over the place. Pre-COVID, we could make some pretty good predictions, at least on case numbers. Post-COVID, that's all I got.
well, we've worked over a lot of information here. Questions for the judge?
Were you more successful in collecting fines when you could suspend somebody's license?
Yes. The reason I hesitate is because 4210 did go into effect right as the COVID lockdowns hit. So it's like,
Hard to know, yeah.
and with the various lockdowns, what we would see is everything bottomed out, and then a stimulus check would come in, and then that month revenue would skyrocket as people start paying a bunch of back fines. And then it would go back down, and then another stimulus check would come out. So, yes. Do I think that repealing 4210 would have a significant impact? I actually don't. Because so many people who aren't paying also fail to appear. So we just suspend them through failure to appear as opposed to non-compliance. Where non-compliance comes in is for the people who enter a plea or are convicted and then don't make payments after that, which is a fairly small percentage.
Anything else for the judge? Looks like your budget is essentially carry forward, keep doing what you're doing, and show up on time for work. Which now will be earlier if you're going to do 410s.
One of the things I've learned is that when you're a judge, you're always on time. Or at least no one says anything when you walk in late.
Yeah, right.
Are you guys working with Jody on the 410s if that has to go through the meeting?
So under the section, I think it's 12.2, don't quote me on that. It's actually at department head discretion.
But you have to give them 14 days notice.
We have to give them 14 days written notice, and we are doing that. So one of the nice things about Jackie Rogers being my court administrator is Jackie's worked within the union for years and has a borderline encyclopedic knowledge of it, to the point where it's kind of annoying. She's probably not calling in. She's on vacation right now, so I can say that. Don't tell her I said it. One thing that is going to be interesting, which I'm not sure what's going to happen here, is DA Olson is changing one of Bill Porter's longstanding policies, where Bill would never charge driving while suspended as a crime. In Oregon, driving while suspended, you have violation, misdemeanor, felony. He would charge all of those as violations, so they all came through my court, no matter what. DA Olson is changing that policy and is going to start charging driving while suspended criminally. I don't know how many of that it's going to change from my court to circuit court. I never looked into it because I didn't care if someone was felony, misdemeanor, or violation driving while suspended. They were all violations when they were being cited to me. But that may or may not have an impact. That'll be an interesting thing to see how many driving while suspended criminal cases go as opposed to violations.
That is interesting, because she used to be a state police officer.
And Memphis City police officer.
All right, well, we have your material and your slides, and thank you very much. We'll do something, even if it's wrong.
No, that's actually the Justice Court motto. Doing something, we may be wrong.
All right, thank you so much. So we've got, do we want to take a real short break? I think we do. Let's do that. Let's try to make it around 7 or 8 minutes, and then we can wrap up with the last two. And